Whether you're a tech enthusiast, industry professional, or just curious about the future of AI Agents Unleashed will keep you informed and inspired. Buckle up and get ready to unleash the potential of AI.
Welcome back, everyone. We're kicking off the new year with, you guessed it, our annual deep dive into the database world of 2024.
Always an adventure, right?
Absolutely. This year, we're unpacking all the highlights, surprises, maybe even some face palms from Andy Pavlo's yearly blog post.
Ah, yes, Andy's blog, the database world's unofficial State of the Union.
Exactly. Get ready for licensing dramas, billion-dollar acquisitions, and oh yeah.
Did someone say a database octogenarian making some interesting moves?
You know it. So let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
One of the biggest themes this year was that tension between open source databases and the cloud. It's like everyone's trying to figure out how to coexist and, actually thrive in this evolving landscape.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, right? Like if an open source database gets really popular, a cloud vendor like Amazon could just offer it as a service.
Right.
And they could potentially make way more money from it than the company that actually created it.
It's almost like a David versus Goliath situation sometimes. And that brings us to the licensing shakeups that really kind of rocked the database world this year. We're talking about Redis and Elasticsearch.
Yeah, those are big.
Can you break down what happened there for us?
Sure. So Redis Limited, the company behind the super popular in-memory database, they decided to switch from a permissive open source license to a more restrictive one.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like what MongoDB did a few years ago. And they also went ahead and acquired Speed, a company known for their work on an open source fork of RocksDB.
Yeah, I remember all the chatter online about the licensing change.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like a lot of people were pretty upset.
Yeah, it caused a huge backlash in the community. 2 new forks, Valky and Radix, popped up almost immediately.
Wow.
Both based on the original open source code. And Valky quickly got the backing of some major players too. Amazon, Google, Oracle, they all jumped on board.
That's a pretty strong message, right? It seems like the community felt like Redis Limited was trying to, I don't know, pull a fast one or something.
Yeah, it definitely created that impression that they were moving away from the open source ethos, especially because they also started being more protective of their trademark and even taking more control over certain open source Redis extensions.
So it wasn't just the licensing, it was like the whole vibe shifted.
Exactly.
Right.
And to make things even more dramatic, the original creator of Redis announced he was actually thinking about making a comeback.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted to try and reunite the community around a truly open source Redis.
Almost like a band getting back together after a very messy breakup.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But before we get too caught up in the Redis saga, let's talk about Elasticsearch. They had their own kind of licensing roller coaster ride this year, didn't they?
Oh, they did. Back in 2021, ElasticNV, the company behind Elasticsearch, adopted a dual licensing model.
Right.
Largely in response to Amazon's growing Elasticsearch service. This move actually led Amazon to create their own fork, OpenSearch.
Ah, so it's kind of like a tit for tat.
Exactly. But then, get this, after 3 years of this back and forth, ElasticNV made a surprise move.
What did they do?
They went back to a fully open source license.
Wow, really?
And then to add another twist, Amazon actually transferred ownership of OpenSearch to the Linux Foundation.
That is a lot of back and forth. Do you think they were just trying to, outmaneuver each other?
It certainly seems that way, but it also kind of highlights a bigger question, right?
What's that?
Can open source database companies really thrive when you have these cloud giants like Amazon who can so easily just replicate or even surpass their offerings? It puts a lot of pressure on them to balance innovation with financial stability.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's interesting, both Redis and Elasticsearch, they face way more backlash than some other companies like MongoDB or CockroachDB who made similar licensing changes. What do you think made these cases different?
Community perception is definitely a big factor. Like with Redis, some people argued that because the company's founders weren't the original creators, it felt like they were profiting off of someone else's work.
So there's a sense of ownership and history that comes into play.
Exactly. Plus, a lot of the code contributions to Redis come from outside the company.
Uh-huh.
So that probably added to the feeling of betrayal within the community.
Makes sense.
And with Elasticsearch, well, they went head-to-head with Amazon, which is known for being, well, let's say assertive in the cloud space.
Yeah, taking on Goliath is never easy. But I think these licensing battles really underscore a challenge for open source companies.
What's that?
How do they balance their values with financial sustainability, especially in this world that is so dominated by the cloud? And for the listener, I guess it means being extra careful when you're choosing an open source database.
For sure.
It's not just about the technology anymore, it's about the long-term viability and the support options.
I agree 100%. Choosing a database is a big decision these days. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about a rivalry that's been making headlines for completely different reasons.
Okay, lay it on me.
Databricks versus Snowflake.
Oh yeah, that's been heating up.
This is not just like friendly competition anymore. This is like all-out war for ecosystem dominance.
It feels like they're constantly trying to one-up each other.
Right. Like they're both trying to control that whole data management pipeline from how the data gets in to how it's processed to how it's analyzed. And they're not exactly being subtle about it either.
Yeah, like when Databricks unveiled their open source large language model, DBRX,
Oh, yeah.
developed by the Mosaic team they acquired for, get this, $1.3 billion.
And then Snowflake came back swinging with their own open source LLM, Arctic,
Right.
with a massive 480 billion parameters. And they make sure to point out how Arctic outperforms DBRX on, quote, enterprise tasks.
It's like they're speaking in code, throwing little jabs at each other through these like press releases and technical specs.
It's entertaining, for sure, but it also highlights how these companies are competing now.
Yeah, it's not just about faster queries anymore.
Exactly. It's about building this whole comprehensive ecosystem that caters to all the needs of a data-driven organization. And that includes AI and LLMs, which are becoming so important.
For things like data analysis and automation.
Exactly.
And that battle for ecosystem dominance got even more intense when it came to data catalogs.
Oh, yeah. Data catalogs are hot right now.
Snowflake had been ramping up their support for Iceberg, which is like a much better way to organize and manage all that data in your data lakes. And there were even rumors that they were about to acquire Tabular.
The company behind Iceberg.
Yeah.
But then Databricks swooped in and bought Tabular for a whopping $2 billion.
Oh.
It was a strategic move to counter Snowflake's launch of their own open source catalog service, Polaris. And then, just to add insult to injury, Databricks open sourced their Unity catalog a week later.
Ouch. Talk about a power move. It seems like this rivalry is pushing both companies to innovate at like warp speed.
For sure, we're seeing new features and open source contributions almost every week.
And ultimately, I guess that benefits users like us.
It does. It means more choices, better tools, and hopefully lower prices in the long run.
Competition often breeds excellence, right? It's like watching two Olympic athletes pushing each other to break world records.
Great analogy. Speaking of amazing performances, there's one database that's been stealing the show lately.
Okay, who are we talking about?
DuckDB.
Oh yeah, DuckDB. It's become so popular, especially among data analysts. Why is it suddenly everywhere?
It's all about simplicity and efficiency.
Okay.
DuckDB is super easy to set up and use, plus it can handle tons of different data formats, CSV, Parquet, even Iceberg.
So it's like a one-stop shop for data analysis.
Pretty much. And it's so good at those analytical queries that some people are even using it instead of those big, expensive data warehouses for certain tasks.
That's impressive, and I understand there's this big trend now of integrating DuckDB with Postgres.
There is. In fact, 4 different extensions were released this year, all about bridging that gap between Postgres and DuckDB.
4! That's a lot. Why is everyone so keen on combining these two?
It's a match made in data heaven. Postgres is awesome for transactional workloads, while DuckDB excels at analytics. By combining them, you get the best of both worlds.
It's like having a superpowered database system that can handle anything you throw at it.
Exactly. So if you're working with data, learning about DuckDB could be a real game changer for you. It's like having that Swiss Army knife for data analysis. Compact, versatile, powerful.
I like it. While all these innovative tools like DuckDB are kind of democratizing data analysis, we can't forget about those big players who are still shaping the landscape.
Right.
Even tech titans like Oracle's Larry Ellison found surprising ways to engage with data in 2024.
Oh yes, Larry. He turned 80 this year, but he showed no signs of slowing down.
Not at all.
Making waves not just in the business world, but in the unexpected realm of college football.
Yeah, his financial wins this year were pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, they were.
Yeah. He climbed up the Forbes billionaire list, became the 3rd richest person in the world, and, get this, he made $15 billion in a single day.
Wow.
When Oracle stock just soared.
He certainly knows how to make an entrance.
And with pockets overflowing, he decided to treat himself and his son. He bought Paramount Studios.
No way.
Yes, for $6 billion and gifted it to his son from his third marriage.
I guess who needs a pony when you can have a whole Hollywood studio, right?
Exactly. But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
He also snagged a Palm Beach resort for a cool $277 million.
Just for a little R&R.
Just for some R&R, but his biggest move, and the one that really left everyone scratching their heads, was this unexpected entry into the world of college football recruiting.
Oh, right. The story that had everyone wondering if Larry had traded his database crown for a coaching whistle.
Exactly. It all started when the University of Michigan announced they had successfully recruited the nation's top quarterback, who was transferring from Louisiana State.
Big news.
Huge news, and buried in that press release was a thank you to Larry and his wife Jacqueline for their support in that whole recruiting effort.
Of course, the internet went wild trying to figure out who this mysterious Larry was.
Right.
And much to everyone's surprise, it was confirmed. The Larry in question was indeed the one and only Larry Ellison.
He had donated $12 million to the booster campaign that helped lure that star quarterback to Michigan.
Wow.
But there's a twist.
There's a twist.
Media sleuths uncovered the identity of Larry's new wife, Jacqueline, also known as Karen Zhu, a Michigan alumna. Turns out, Larry's grand gesture was a tribute to his wife's alma mater.
That's actually kind of sweet.
It's a reminder that even titans of industry have a soft spot, and Larry's seems to be for love and apparently college football.
I love it. What's even more remarkable is that Larry, who famously didn't graduate from any university, became a major booster for a school he had no prior connection to.
It just shows you the power of love.
And Larry's ability to make things happen.
Right. But before we get too lost in the Larry Ellison saga, let's take a quick look at some other notable happenings in the database world during 2024.
Okay, sounds good.
There were quite a few new releases, acquisitions, funding rounds, and even a couple of shutdowns that deserve our attention.
Right. It was a year of dynamic shifts and exciting developments, to say the least.
So let's dive into those right after this. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground in our deep dive into the database world of 2024, but let's take a step back and look at the big picture.
Sounds good.
What are the major takeaways here? What trends should we all be keeping an eye on as we head into 2025 and beyond?
Well, one of the biggest themes was that whole open source versus cloud tug of war. It's a tension that's not going away anytime soon.
Right.
Those licensing battles we talked about earlier really highlighted how much pressure open source companies are under to protect their business models while still trying to stay competitive.
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act for sure. And it's not just about licensing either, right? We're seeing cloud vendors increasingly integrate those open source technologies into their own offerings. It's getting harder and harder to tell where open source ends and proprietary begins.
Definitely. And I think it's becoming less about a clear-cut divide and more about finding ways for both sides to benefit. Open source companies need to offer more than just the code. They need to differentiate themselves, provide real unique value. And cloud vendors, well, they need to embrace the innovation and that community that open source brings to the table.
Yeah, so it's a pretty complex dance, and ultimately it's up to users like you listening to navigate this whole landscape
Right.
and choose the solutions that fit your needs best.
Exactly.
Whether that's a fully managed cloud service or a self-hosted open source solution, or maybe even some kind of combination of the two.
I think we'll see more and more of those hybrid approaches.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just about the technology itself, right? You've got to consider the licensing implications, the support model, the community around the project, the whole ecosystem. It's about making those smart choices, not just chasing the latest shiny object.
Couldn't agree more.
And speaking of competition, another key theme this year was that battle for ecosystem dominance.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
We saw it play out most dramatically between Databricks and Snowflake, but it's happening across the entire database industry.
It's not enough to just have a great database anymore. Companies need to offer this comprehensive ecosystem that includes data ingestion, transformation, analysis, machine learning.
Everything.
You name it. They're all trying to become that one-stop shop for all your data needs.
And all this competition, I mean, it's driving some really incredible innovation, right? We're seeing new features, new integrations, new open source projects popping up all the time.
It's great for users because it gives you more options and better tools, but it also creates a lot of complexity. It's hard to keep up with all the changes and make sense of everything that's happening.
Yeah, and that's where resources like Andy Pavlo's blog are so helpful.
Absolutely.
They provide that high-level perspective on the trends that really matter.
I completely agree. And don't underestimate the value of staying connected to the community, too.
Yeah.
Engage in online forums, go to conferences, follow those thought leaders in the field. That's how you stay ahead of the curve.
Great advice. And of course, we can't forget about the rise of innovative tools like DuckDB.
DuckDB is awesome.
Its simplicity, its portability, its versatility. I mean, it's really appealing.
Especially for data analysts.
Yeah.
It just proves that sometimes the best solutions are the ones that focus on solving those very specific problems really, really well.
Right.
It's not trying to be everything to everyone. It's great at analytical queries, and it does it in a way that's easy to use.
And its integration with Postgres shows how different technologies can really work together. You can have the reliability of Postgres for your transactional workloads, and then the analytical power of DuckDB for exploring and gaining insights from your data.
It's a great example of synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
So as we kind of wrap up here and look ahead to 2025 and beyond, what are some of the big questions that come to mind? What trends are you watching closely?
Well, I'm really interested to see how AI and LLMs will continue to shape the database landscape.
Yeah.
We saw some early examples of this in 2024, but I think we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, for sure.
Imagine databases that can just answer your questions in plain English, or automatically optimize those complex queries, or even generate code for you.
That's a pretty amazing thought.
Huh?
I'm also curious to see how that open source versus cloud dynamic continues to play out.
Yeah.
Will we see more licensing disputes? Will new models of collaboration emerge? Will those lines between open source and proprietary become even blurrier?
All great questions, and I think the answers are going to have a huge impact on the future of databases and how we interact with data.
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about. So for our listeners, I think the key takeaway is this. The database world is constantly changing, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
It keeps things interesting, for sure.
Stay curious, stay informed, and never stop learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And if you want to dive deeper into any of the topics we talked about today, I highly recommend checking out Andy Pavlov's full blog post.
Yeah, it's definitely a treasure trove of database wisdom with a bit of humor thrown in for good measure.
Always a good read.
Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into databases in 2024. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy data explorations.